I'm really excited to give this homily. But when I get excited, I tend to preach too quickly, so I'm trying to slow myself down already, all right? Because this is the second reading, which I think most of us probably have heard before. It's actually our entrance antiphon today from Philippians, right? Rejoice in the Lord always. And then he says, I shall say it again, rejoice. And why does St. Paul say this? Because why? Because the Lord is near. And we see that, right? Well, we lit the rose-colored candle, where we have one more candle to go, and then after that it's Christmas. And we get really excited, not only about this, we're excited about Christmas, but also that reality that we do know that the Lord is already near. And it's so near, by the way, that today when we come, we're going to receive him and the Eucharist. And if you're not excited about that, then we're going to continue to work on that. Because we have the opportunity to receive him, the one who loves us, the one who desires to fill every single part of our soul, of our being, the one who desires to fulfill all of our desires. And we know that the Lord is near. And we should be excited every single time that we come to Mass, because I get to receive him, and he gets to abide in me. And hopefully this last week you've been spending some time really trying to figure out, okay, where are those areas of my life that I need to clear out so the Lord has even more room inside of me, so he can fill you even more. And that's why we rejoice, because we do know that the Lord is near and he's there for us because he loves us and he wants to take care of us. But St. Paul continues as well in this reading, and it's so beautiful. He says, have no anxiety at all. Now, actually, we could rephrase this. It almost like as a commandment that St. Paul is telling to the Philippians. Remember, he's writing this as a letter to them to try to help them. This is how you're called to live. And so he says, thou shalt have no anxiety. Okay, he doesn't put it that way, right? But that's essentially what he's saying. Thou shalt have no anxiety. That's a lot easier said than done, isn't it? Because so often we can be filled with anxiety. We feel the things that trouble us. And what St. Paul is saying is pretty much what Jesus said over and over and over again, right? Have no anxiety. Where do we see this? Especially probably in Matthew chapter 6, the Sermon on the Mount. That's what Jesus says. Therefore, I tell you, do not be anxious about your life, what you should eat or what you shall drink, nor about your body, what you shall put on. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothing? Maybe some of us were anxious this morning coming ooh, did we get the right pink on, right? Do we find that, or we forgot, we're oh, Father's me oh, he forgot. And that can cause, I know it's a silly example, but it's an easy example, right? Not to be anxious. Matthew 6, a little later. Do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Let the day's own trouble be sufficient for the day. And ooh, so now we're supposed to have trouble? But we do have trouble. But so Jesus is saying, what should we call to do with this? To hand it over to him, to trust in him, to abide in him. We see this with the story of Martha and Mary as well. We know that story. Martha, who's all anxious about trying to serve the Lord, and there's Mary just sitting at the foot of Jesus. And what does Jesus say to Martha? Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things. One thing is needed. And what is that one thing? It's the Lord. It's God. He is the one that can fulfill all that we need. But the question is, do we truly put our trust in him? It's from the book Abandonment to Divine... No, this is actually a book from Into Your Hands by Wilfred Stenson. There's a passage in there that says this: if you are troubled about anything, If you're anxious about anything, that means that you're not completely abandoned to God's will. If you're anxious about anything, that means you're not completely abandoned to God's will. Okay, that's me. We can be honest. We have anxiety. It comes in there, right? What does anxiety look like? And it looks different for everyone, right? But there's a couple general principles here for anxiety. And we know the world is anxious. And we know, by the way, anxiety levels have skyrocketed. I've preached about this before. I think it was in 2003, all of a sudden in teenagers and college kids, anxiety skyrocketed. What came out in 2003, 2004? I remember I was at University of St. Thomas. I'm like, my buddy was in the computer. I'm like, what are you looking? He goes, this thing called Facebook. Yep. And now we're all attached to our phones. Okay, and I'm not here to say we have to get rid of everything. I'm not saying that. But if it's causing you anxiety, what should you do? Either A, get rid of it completely, or put some parameters on it, right? It's a side note that the way that we can figure if we're anxious is when you wake up in the morning, what do you think about? What weighs on your heart? And if it is weighing on your heart and it's maybe even causing a little bit of a pain in there, that's a sign of anxiety. What do you think about all day? What's kind of going through your mind that's really just like, oof, that's weighing me down? It's a sign of anxiety. I know me sometimes, like I look, I'm like, oh, I know there's going to be an email waiting for me today. That's anxiety. It's what it is. So St. Paul's like, but do not be anxious. But he doesn't stop there, and that's the beautiful thing. He doesn't stop there. Instead, he actually gives us a remedy. This is what he says. Have no anxiety at all, but in everything, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, make your request known to God. With prayer and petition, with prayer and supplication, make your request known to God. So we can go to the Lord and say, Lord, I'm giving this over to you. Help me. And once again, we know that the Lord is near, and that he does want to help us. He does want to love us. And that's why we're able to rejoice, because he's there for us, that we are not walking alone. St. Paul says to the Philippians, and he says it to us as well, make your request known. An image we can use theologically here, right? Lay it at the foot of the cross. Lay it at the foot of the altar. That's what we're called to do, to hand it over to the Lord. I want to use an image with you. It's probably not quite as theological. We'll come back to a theological image at the end, all right? But just something that's really helped me in my life, I want to share with you. You know, I think many of you guys maybe know part of my vocation story. It's a little weird. When I was a child, I wanted to be a garbage man. Because I loved in St. Paul on those alleys that the garbage men and women, I guess back then in the 80s, it was only men, would ride on the back of the truck. I was like, I want to do that. And they could drive it from ooh, that would be cool with the hydraulics. And one time a garbage man gave me a sucker. I was like, oh, I'm set, right? I get candy, I can ride the back of a truck. What else could a 7-year-old want? Of course, the Lord did not call me to become a garbage man. Praise God. But sometimes in my priesthood, I feel like I'm just collecting garbage. And I like that part of the priesthood. That I'm able to help, I'm able to pray, I'm able to console. It can start to weigh me down. But really, the most garbage I have is my own, right? I'm carrying my own stuff, my own anxieties, my own troubles. And so what I do in prayer sometimes is I imagine, and I know this sounds weird, I probably preached about it before a little bit, but at the end of the day, what does the garbage truck do? It goes to the dump. It doesn't bring it home with him. And it lets it go. So sometimes in prayer, in my mind, I imagine that I am a garbage truck, and I know I am not a garbage truck, all right? But I imagine just that beep, beep, beep of the truck backing up. And I go, here you go. I'm emptying it all to you. But the beautiful thing, it's not a dump. It's the Lord. Lord, here you go. I'm making all of my requests known to you in prayer and petition. And actually, we do this what? As St. Paul says, with thanksgiving. Now, what does the word Eucharist mean, by the way? Thanksgiving, right? And so when we come to the Eucharist to receive the Lord who is near, we come to him with prayer and petition, with thanksgiving to him, making our requests known so we can truly lay them down at the foot of the altar. And this is what the Lord is saying, is that I'm going to purify this sacrifice. I'm going to purify these requests. I'm going to make them anew. And so he's saying, give them over to me. You don't have to carry this anymore. And when this happens, St. Paul continues, what's going to happen? Then the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, and that's what we long for. We long for his peace. But if we are anxious, if we are troubled, we don't experience that peace. And so the Lord's like, hey, just give it to me. Can I help? Can I love? Give it over to me. And so as you know, since September, by the way, we've been doing something new here at St. John the Baptist. It's the Mass intention cards. And this week, once I'm giving you homework, I want everyone, kids, adults, grandparents, to take a card this week. And you want to grab it now and find out that gives me some affirmation. You're actually listening to the homily, right? But take one of these cards this week. And when you wake up in the morning, say, okay, what's on my heart that I need to hand over to the Lord? And write it down. Now, yes, the most important part is at that point, we don't just write it down. We have to say, okay, Lord, here you go. But then next week when we come to Mass, just to place that card in the basket, saying, I don't have to carry this anymore. And I hope when you come into the basket next week, you're not going beep, 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 by the way, right? But in our mind, we can say, no, I am coming to the foot of the cross, the altar, the sacrifice. And Lord, here you go. I don't need to carry this anymore. And be honest with yourself, too. What is it? Be okay for praying for yourself. That's all right. It's actually a really good thing. Lord, I just have anxiety. I don't know you. Lord, I'm troubled because of just that area in my life that I can't seem to overcome in that sin. Whatever it is, write it down. And then what's going to happen? We're going to experience that peace that the Lord longs to give us. We're going to be able to rejoice always. Rejoicing in the Lord because we know that he truly is near.